All right. There we go. Let's see if that works. We were having a little tech experimentation there, and we were all in the backstage area, and I think we might be making our way into the front. So for any attendees who are here now, if you can just be patient with us as we sort this out. This is a new platform for us because we like playing. Oh, and there's Afton. Excellent. Was that pretty smooth, Afton?
Yes.
You get over to here? Okay, excellent. All right, and there's my helper, Catherine. Wonderful.
Hi.
We'll just wait a couple minutes and see if James and Kelsey are able to get in here also. That was really surprising. I thought that it would be a one button entry and not.
I'm just gonna head backstage and see what's keeping them.
Okay, thank you. Awesome. And there's Kelsey. Yay. Hi, Kelsey.
Hello. Took me a second to find the webinar button, but I'm here.
Yeah. Catherine just went back into the backstage to see if James can figure that out. This is a new thing for us. So we were talking in the backstage area, just for anybody who's here, that we're using a different software for this roundtable. So it's going to be a little new, and we might, have a couple little goof ups along the way. But it looks like we're all here, so that's awesome. Hi, James.
Hello. I'm finally figured out where the button is. So
yeah, I'm glad. That's awesome. Okay, well, welcome to our roundtable, you guys. This is our function, Trump's fashion. This webinar is going to be a conversation around ways that websites have impact and our shared experiences as various types of digital professionals in the industry. And I think all of us probably combined have a lot of years of history in the digital space in a whole variety of different ways, which is really cool. So we've got a lot of different perspectives here, which I'm really excited about. I'd like to offer you each a chance to give yourself a little brief introduction. And I was going to do the introduction myself, and then I thought I might as well warm up your voices. So it will go in order of my screen. And then if you each just want to say who you are, the name of your company, and why you joined in today, that'd be awesome. So Afton, you want to go first?
Sure. Thanks so much for having me, Steph. And excited to hear from the other panelists as well. And welcome to everybody who's attending today. My name is Afton Brazzoni. My company is Scribe National. We're a content writing studio. We mainly write long form marketing content for B2B technology companies, but we do work with a lot of B2B businesses, whether that's service-based businesses, coaches, consultants. And really why I'm here today is, well, I just love participating in anything that Steph is doing. I was on another panel for her a couple months ago, but I think, what I bring here is the perspective, not so much from a technical background, but from the, the words of the website, right? So I actually often used to say substance over style for a website. So, really similarly to function trumps fashion. And I think that's what I'm most excited to dig into today, is really just how it's not only the visuals of your website, but what you're actually saying on there that makes an impact as well.
Awesome. I like that, substance over style. That's very smart. Very cool. Okay, Kelsey, your turn.
Hello. Yeah, thank you for having me, Steph. This is super exciting. I'm Kelsey Matheson. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've built many businesses over the years. I'm the founder and co-owner of Anamaya Resort in Costa Rica. I'm also the founder of Bee Outfitter, which is a backpack company that helped to put children around the world through school. We sold that successfully in 2020. I've owned yoga clothing companies, wellness and online wellness programs, digital products in terms of health and wellness. And so that led me to become a business coach for women entrepreneurs. So I help women make more money doing what they love. And so I'm coming to this panel today from the perspective as an entrepreneur, and utilizing their website to grow their business, to serve more people, and to make more money. So I'm super excited to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Welcome, Kelsey. This is going to be fun. All right, James, your turn.
Yeah. Hello, my name is James Warrenkin. I am with Apex Communications Network and the Blind Institute of Technology. I'm based out of Northeast Ohio. And my background with both of the companies I work with is in the digital accessibility space. I've lived with a visual impairment for the last 17 years, progressively losing my vision. And my sort of add to today's conversation is how do we make sure that we're designing experiences with everyone in mind, including those with disabilities who are using assistive technology.
Fantastic. Yeah, we're really excited to have you here, James. This is very cool. Oh, and I guess so I'm Stephanie. My name is Steph. You can call me Steph. My company is Clarity Web Design Studio. We're based in Nova Scotia. And we are all about providing findable and functional websites. Our specialization is to go into websites that have been around for a little while and they're not really doing what they need to do anymore. And so we love to, we call it rejuvenation. And we do that, and then we track it for about 3 months afterwards, and then we do the little before and after stats, and it's just really, really cool, the differences that can be made just from taking what you have and reorganizing it, and then making, like, removing as many barriers as possible, whether that's from an accessibility point of view or SEO or what have you. So that's, I think that'll do the trick. So let's get going. So today's roundtable, we want to talk about, like we were saying, around the substance and not just the style. So we want to get beyond the visual design of the website, which has its purposes, absolutely, and getting into that discussion around the functionality of the website and how we can find that balance. And I'm really interested in hearing from this panel the different experiences that you've had over the years with the different things that we've tried, and we've had successes and failures. I'm sure we've all had a combination of both of those things. And then at the end of this conversation, we will extend an invitation to any of the attendees to an exclusive webinar that we're going to hold on March 6th. And that one is to illustrate what it can look like to work with us, with Clarity Web Design Studio, to essentially to 2x your website impact in about 90 days or less. And that's what we do with our website rejuvenation service. So, and what we typically find is that when we do that, our clients see an average increase in organic search traffic of about 500%, which sounds ridiculous, but it's true. So that's kind of fun. So let's get started on our conversation, which I'm really excited about. So my first question for the panel is to wonder why, like, what inspired your specialization in your business? And I know some of us, Kelsey, might have to choose just one, but I'm really curious to hear about what drives you in the business that you're doing. I know we heard a little bit about it, I think, in your intros, but I'm curious to see if you have a little bit more you'd like to say. And I'll go first. So mine was, I got into the accessibility advocacy piece of online presence and digital accessibility and stuff. Back in 2019, I attended a webinar by a blind web designer who was in London, whose name just escapes me, but James, I'll send it to you later because I'm curious to see if you know about her already. And this webinar was just mind-blowing for me because I had, up until that point, I'd had very little concept of the technological foundation that websites were running on. I was making a lot of assumptions that the systems that I chose were just doing whatever they needed to do, but I didn't really understand what that was. So when she did this webinar and she was using a screen reader and she had to slow it way down for those of us that have never experienced it before, it was like this auctioneer going in the background. And just this idea of not being able to rely on those visual graphics to get your messaging across was so enlightening for me. And it really changed my whole approach and my whole understanding of the thing. And so from there, my experiences sort of grew from there. And I just think it's just fascinating. And so now my big thing is the accessibility thing and removing all of those barriers, but also that the empathy in your approach to your online website, because it benefits everybody. We always say that a good design is good for everyone. And part of that is, because everybody is impacted by this, including coming out of the pandemic and this, massive cognitive stress load, this unprecedented stress that every one of us has been operating under for 3-4 years. And this idea that, we're unloading all of this website content and expecting them to figure it out, And so I think this approaching it with the accessibility lens and this user experience lens benefits absolutely everybody. And if it benefits your end user, it's going to benefit your business too. So that's my jam. Afton, what would you say inspired your specialization in your business as a content strategy?
Yeah, well, first, I just want to say that was so well said, Steph. Thank you. I think something you actually said is similar when you mentioned like not having them have to figure it out. I think so for me, I've been a storyteller since childhood. And so that's really what got me into this line of work. And I actually started out as a journalist, and then I went into PR, and then I went into marketing. But at the core of everything that I've done over the past 15 years in my career, it has been storytelling and writing. But I think going back to what you said, we often think, and it's true, you know, a story, it needs to be interesting, it needs to be compelling, it needs to be all of those things. But when it comes to your marketing, and also when it comes to your website, it needs to be clear first and foremost before it's clever. And I think with marketing, we want to do the fancy thing or the trendy thing or the clever thing, and those things can work and be great. But if we're not being clear, and if we're putting that onus on our audience to figure it out, you know, to try to understand, we work with a lot of complex businesses at Scribe, and the communication, excuse me, the success or failure really comes down to how clear can you be? How much legwork can you sort of take off of their plate? And so I think, you know, I'm really passionate about that, helping people tell stories in a way that is compelling, but that also connects the dots for their audience really easily.
Yeah, awesome. Excellent. Okay, thank you. Kelsey, what inspired your specialization? And I don't know if you can pick just one, or if maybe your inspiration is maybe sort of a consistent underlying approach.
Yeah, well, because I think for me, I started building businesses. Like I was an entrepreneur, and and I built 6-figure businesses, 7-figure businesses. I'd built businesses that were total flops, but I was a serial entrepreneur, and I just loved I love the idea of having an idea for a business or a company and running with it and growing it. And that to me was, you know, it was so exciting. And I was all in, and I knew I would never work for someone ever again. But then what happened was I found that a lot of women were coming to me saying, I want to know how you do what you do. Teach me what you do. And so I would refer them to business coaches or to people I knew. And my husband said to me, they come to you because they want to know what you do. You can teach them what it is that you do in terms of, you know, growing a business and managing that business and marketing that business and making money. And I was like, yeah, but I'm not a coach. I'm an entrepreneur. And he's like, yeah, but you could teach them. So I thought, okay, well, let me think about this. This is something I wanted to take on. And because of my resort, in Costa Rica, Anamaya, we run week-long health and wellness retreats, but we also run 3-week-long yoga teacher trainings. So we had all of these people who were, you know, these amazing people from around the world, hundreds of people, who were coming to Anamaya, thousands probably now, to get their yoga teaching certification and become yoga teachers. And they were all very inspired to become yoga teachers, but they had no idea how to run a business. And not only did they not have any idea on how to run a business, they were also conditioned to women in general are conditioned to have a dysfunctional relationship with money. And so these women were great at yoga, great at teaching yoga. I also found that this was happening with life coaches, amazing life coaches, right? And then I kind of expanded who I was working with to integrative doctors and chiropractors and nutritionists, because they're great at what they do, but they really struggled with how to run a business, number one, and their relationship with money. So I became a certified life and business coach. I now work with women to help, mostly in the health and wellness space, to grow their businesses, to make more money doing what they do, to improve their relationship with money, but also learn what it takes really to be an entrepreneur. So that's kind of how I shifted. I still run Anamaya, and we sold the backpack company and the yoga clothing company. But so now my two main focuses are running the resort and helping women build their businesses. So
That's really cool. I like how so far we've kind of fallen into something like it might be slightly different from where we started. I think that's kind of
yeah.
interesting. James, I'd love to hear what your story is. What's your what inspired your specialization?
So I'll continue on the trend of falling into something because
Oh yeah.
I was diagnosed with my visual impairment when I was 9, and I actually went to college for business marketing. So my professional career, even in college, started out as digital marketing, building and designing websites. SEO was actually like the first job that I had, was in search engine optimization. It wasn't until the pandemic when I found myself in a conversation with an organization that strictly worked with the blind and visually impaired, that they asked me how I was making the websites I was building accessible for people with different disabilities. And to me, that was kind of like a little bit of a culture shock moment, because up until that point, I was the person that tried to hide my disability. I didn't really like to talk about it. I didn't like, if nobody asked about it, I wasn't saying anything. So I was sort of living this sort of imposter syndrome lifestyle where I work from a computer. I don't really have to do a whole lot of person-to-person interaction. So it's very easy to hide it. And up until that point, I was really under the impression that I just needed to make the world accessible to me. And that was it. I didn't know that I could, that the whole business side of the conversation even existed, that we had a responsibility as business owners or developers or designers or whatever that title is to make what we're doing accessible and inclusive. And so I actually leaned into it after that conversation. And over the course of 21, 22, I did a bunch of research and experimentation, getting mentorship, ultimately to sort of blend the digital marketing with the digital accessibility worlds into one. With Apex now, accessibility is at the core of everything we do. If we're building your website, it's going to be accessible from day one. It's not an added fee or anything like that. And with BIT, I do all of the education and training around accessibility best practices with developers, designers, QAs, management, legal teams, all of that. So I really fell into accessibility thanks to the digital marketing space and that career path, really finding a way to blend those together, and use that original experience to make it easier for other people to understand what does accessible look like in Figma, in WordPress, in Shopify, in your own native applications and things like that. That has probably been one of the biggest advantages of my original background and falling into accessibility outside of the big elephant in the room that I have lived experience. I've grown up with a disability. I've went through school and college and finding my first job and experienced a lot of those barriers and challenges firsthand to be able to address them a lot easier and have those conversations where people feel comfortable a lot of times for the first time asking questions about accessibility or disabilities or assistive technology. I really try to create that environment where it feels safe, it feels comfortable, it feels relaxed, like you're not being looked at sideways or judged for asking a specific question that you're curious about.
Yeah, I love that. I love that a lot. Yeah, this is very exciting. So it's hilarious that we all fell into this for a variety of different ways. And I think it's interesting too, because I think there's a good solid argument that all of those previous experiences that have led us to this path that we're now on, I don't know that we could have ended up in a different place, right? So I think that's really interesting. So thank you for sharing that, you guys. That was really cool. So let's get into some questions then around website impact. So I'm curious, I thought maybe one of the things we could start with would be, we've all had experience with websites then in various roles and functions. Maybe I should, before we do that, maybe I should check in with Catherine because I can't actually see what's going on at the bottom of my screen. Catherine, is there any chats, questions, anything that we need to look at before we?
We don't have any chats. I encourage
Okay.
anybody to put any questions in the chat option. That would be fine. We've got lots of people joining us.
Awesome.
And I'll let you know if we have anything come up.
Great, thank you. So yeah, any questions, do, just like Catherine said, stick them in the chat. We're going to go through a number of sort of conversational things now, and then we're going to try to have a period at the end of today's roundtable where we can get through some of the questions that have been sent in. And I think a thing just popped up. Catherine, do you see that? Someone has raised a hand. Becca, is this a question for the panel? You're welcome to unmute yourself if you're able to. I don't know if you can. Maybe we have to allow you that ability.
Just give me a second here and I'll look
Sure.
into it.
Okay. All right. So while we wait, we've got, I don't know what's happening. Okay. We've got all these hands popping up and I'm not sure what's happening. So we're going to let Catherine look after that. Meanwhile, I'd like to talk about some examples that some of our panelists might have worked with or worked on in the past where the impact of the website went beyond visual appeal. And then secondary to that, I would like to explore how you were able to verify that impact. So how did you know that this difference, that this impact of the website that wasn't visual, how did you know that it was having an impact? And I wonder if maybe, do you want me to volunteer someone to start, or if you want to just unmute yourselves and we can just have a casual conversation?
I can kick off the conversation.
Sure.
You mentioned the screen reader when you
Mhm.
were in that webinar, and the whole premise behind a screen reader is turning the visual design into audio, and describing what that visual structure and layout and order, and even describing the images or the graphics and visuals on that page. So I think that is the perfect way to kick off the conversation, that no matter how good or what colors you're using or what font styles or embellishments you're using, a lot of that doesn't translate into assistive technology that well. For example, if I'm highlighting text in a paragraph to emphasize it, or using bold or italic, to a screen reader, a lot of that isn't going to translate. It's just going to be read as plain text anyway. So you really need to look a little bit deeper into how do we emphasize this in a way that when it's turned into audio, isn't going to disrupt the experience, but also it's not going to distract or it's not going to be ignored. And a lot of times in design, images have a purpose, they have a reason for being put in there. And a lot of times when what we see in testing is that the description of that image is very direct or straightforward. If it's a picture of a Labrador retriever, the alt text on that will just say a Labrador retriever, and not take it that one step further, describing why there's a Labrador retriever on the page.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, and it's a perfect example, right? Like that because you can speak directly to the non-visual elements directly on the website. So that's interesting because, there's a lot of talk around how to handle images and the alt tags, because it is the alt tags you're referring to, right? Not the image description per se.
Yeah.
So I've seen some things around how to use those alt tags. There's the older SEO strategy, which was like keyword stuffing, which is a no-no, by the way, don't do it. But it used to be like that those alt tags were the opportunity to get your website to sort of rank a little higher. How do you feel about that kind of experience? What's that like for you when you visit a website?
Well, that was the world I started in. I was putting as many keywords in there as possible when I was just designing for search engines, and not really thinking too much about the assistive technology piece, because I didn't use screen readers at that time. So that's where I started out, was how many keywords or how many buzzwords can I fit in the alt tag before Google starts to push it down the page instead of up. And now I'm sort of looking at that from a little bit different of a perspective of how can I correlate the text next to or around this to this image so that when you hear the description of the image, it makes sense. But how can we do that in a concise way? We don't want to be writing an entire paragraph description as the alt text. Generally, it's between like 70 and 150 characters. And the reason we want to keep it sort of brief is because unlike when a screen reader is reading a paragraph, you can pause it and resume. When it's reading alt text or any of those backend tags, you can't interrupt it. It either goes all the way through or you have to restart from the beginning. So if it's long, you're going to fatigue the user that's hearing it. And then if they accidentally, if they accidentally hit the arrow key or the tab key, then they got to restart all the way from the beginning. So
brutal. I had no idea.
A little bit of sort of finesse that has to happen in writing those descriptions. Generally, if you can't do it in a sentence, put it as a long description below or next to the image, so that they can interrupt and resume and pick up where they left off.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me, and I think there's a really solid argument from our perspective anyway, that if it's something that you want people to read, then to put it right on the surface of the site, and not fuss too much around the alt tags, provided it's still providing a good experience.
Yeah, and I think there's a fine line between decorative and styling versus function. A lot of the embellishments we're using are purely there for design. And if that's the case, you don't need to share that with a screen reader necessarily. You can put the null attribute and have the assistive technology ignore it if it's just a watermark or a background image that's adding some color or some visual cue. You don't really need to describe that. You can just mark it null and let the assistive technology pass right through it.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So when I mentioned about like ways that you would verify that impact, I mean, you obviously have that lived experience verification of the impact, because you know very well whether the website is going to have a good impact or not. But I wonder if can you speak a little bit towards the SEO impact? Because I think that's something that a lot of people have misunderstandings around, is how the search engine optimization and those alt tags specifically.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I can't turn that part of my brain off. It's kind of like that curse of like, once you learn about it, you can't unlearn it. So I do still track some of the things Google is doing as far as like the search engine factors. And they're actually trending more towards accessibility as a factor of how you rank. Whether that's due to the user experience, if I'm bouncing within a couple of seconds because I can't navigate the website because it's not accessible, or because the alt text and the descriptions aren't there, they're starting to implement some accessibility best practice into the factors that determine how you rank. I believe inside of Google Search Console, if you run like the performance report, where it shows you like the core web vitals and things like that, accessibility is now one of those next to best practices and SEO inside of the Search Console reports.
Yeah, we've looked at a couple of those. I mean, there's a lot of ways that you can assess that stuff, but I don't think there's anything that we're aware of yet that can really replace the human factor.
Right. The gap between what Google is looking for and what the user is looking for is closing.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah.
If you're not providing a good accessible experience, Google will pick that up.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's kind of like that, if it's accessible, then it provides a better user experience. And I think what you were saying about, Google and the other search engines are rewarding websites that provide that good user experience now, with like Google Analytics 4 and stuff, in ways that they never did before. So that's been really interesting to watch.
Well, it's almost 25% of the population that's impacted. So pretty big number.
Yeah, it sure is. Yeah, that's really interesting. Okay, cool. What about Afton? Do you have anything you can share around like a website where the impact went beyond the visuals? And I'm sure you do, because of your content focus, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that's where I was going to go with that. And I think, similarly to what James was saying, it really comes down to, is it working for the user? Like, is it working for the audience? And so when we think about that from a content perspective, we're thinking about, is it, again, that whole thing with clear over clever? Are we getting to the point? Is it giving them the information that they need? When you think about a blog post, for example, and we write web page copy, landing page copy, and those things in addition to blog posts, but just with the example of a blog, the title or the topic of that blog, how quickly are we getting to that information in the post? Are we sort of doing the whole bait and switch thing where the title is something really catchy, but then when they actually get to the post, it's not about that? So we really want to make sure that we're not doing things like that, and that we are laying out clearly what is going to be found on the page, and thinking about search intent and what are they actually trying to accomplish when they navigate to this page, and making sure that we deliver on that. And so I would say, we've had instances where clients have said organic search is their highest channel of inbound leads, above email marketing, above advertising, above anything else, that we've helped them work on their blog, increase their customer base, by well over 100%. And really, I think with marketing, there's so much that you could do, and it is hard, and you have to pick where you're going to focus your efforts. But if you are going to make organic search a focus, and if you always talk about, websites being findable, if we want it to be findable, okay, well, we want it to be findable, but we also want them to stay as well, right? And so I think crafting things intentionally for the user, answering their questions, giving them valuable information. Some of this sounds like the basics, but those are all foundational things for a reason, because they matter, and thinking about their experience as they navigate through the site. So yeah, I would say that we definitely do that with the copy that we write for the main pages of the site, as well as for things like blogs, resources, places that they can go to learn more. And I would also say clear calls to action would be another thing. And this isn't one that I really have stats around on how we've made a difference with customers, but I know anecdotally that, just the way that we invite people to navigate through the site, having a button that says click here, for example, it's not really telling them what we're asking them to do, what we're asking them to take action on. Are we asking them to join something, to download something? So again, just being really clear and guiding people to where you want them to go on the website. Again, going back to not having them figure it out themselves, just making that journey seamless, and not leaving them with any questions or confusion, I think would be some of the biggest things.
Yeah, that's cool. And I like yeah, I was going to say James probably has a good comment around that, those unclear calls to action. And I would also say, James, before I bring you in for that, we started talking last, I think it was 2 years ago now, around referring to them as calls to value instead of calls to action, to try to change that mindset around what that button is there for in the first place. And that if that context isn't on the text, which in this part I'm sure James could speak to. James, I'm pointing at you like as if anybody cares where you are on my screen. It's just so these goofy things that we do. But a call to value to provide that context, and also a much more clear, to make it clear like what that button is going to do for that person. So sorry, so James, do you want to say something about the
I was just going to say, from my world, like, I couldn't agree more. Like, clarity, the more context you can provide, chances are the more accessible it's going to be, whether that's labeling your form fields or your buttons or your links, or anything that the user can interact with. The more clarity, the more context you can provide, the better it's going to be for that user experience, no matter how they're interacting with a mouse, with a keyboard, with a touch screen, and any other type of assistive technology. And I really like that call to value instead of call to action.
Yeah, it seems to be it's more evocative for sure, but I think it's easier for people to understand the value piece, like why we're doing this in the first place, right? So I think that's maybe we'll have to start making that more mainstream. Kelsey, what about you? What in all of your various entrepreneur experiences, can you share an example of a website that was maybe one of your own sites where the impact went beyond that visual appeal? I mean, I don't know what your if any of those were e-commerce sites, or they're more,
Well,
they sounded more like
so
service-based.
yeah, well, I think with Anamaya, it's a little bit of both, right? So Anamaya Resort, we've been open for a little over 14 years now, and when we started, we were very, very small. My business partners built the site, and then about 6 or 7 years in, we woke up and we just kind of realized that our website was really old. It was really outdated. It wasn't very mobile friendly, and we just really hadn't done a good job of maintaining it. But the thing was, it hadn't been impacting our business at that time, because what we were offering in terms of it being a retreat center, there weren't a lot of yoga retreat centers or health retreat centers around the world. So we were still kind of swimming in blue waters, so to speak. Our word of mouth marketing was super strong. Our repeat clientele was super strong. We were sort of running ads, right? But so the function of the website at that time was just to really show off the location, because we were located in a gorgeous location, and just kind of to communicate the pricing, the options for packages that we had at the time, and to just contact to fill out a reservation form so that our reservation team could contact you. That was basically it. But it was kind of ugly. But it wasn't really hindering us until it was. And so I think what happened was, I think it's easy, especially for the women that I work with, it's easy to kind of build out their websites and then they just kind of forget about it. Right. Yeah. Right. And so for us, retreat centers started popping up around the world, and all of a sudden what we were offering wasn't as unique as it was. And, when people would land on our website, as to what Afton was talking about, it wasn't very clear, and I think, it wasn't very user friendly, and James said something that made me think, confused buyers won't purchase, right? So I think it just wasn't leaving a good impression, and it wasn't just about the aesthetics, but it really was about the functionality, and the user experience was super clunky. So we did an overhaul. But what's interesting is we're doing that all over again. We're back in the same process right now, because again, things change. How people book their stays change, how people book their hotels change. People are so much more comfortable just wanting to pay for everything immediately on site, whereas before they weren't really comfortable doing that. They wanted to speak to our reservations team. They wanted to have a connection with somebody in person or over the phone or even through email first, where now it's like they're sitting on their couch and they're like, I want to go on a yoga retreat, and they Google us and we come up. They want to be able to book their stay instantly. We're more of an instant gratification society.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And
yeah, so I was just going to say, so now we're in the process of implementing a brand new reservation system, which we were looking at doing 3 years ago even, but there weren't enough customized options for us. But now there are, and so because we couldn't, the way that we run our retreats, we couldn't really use the standard hotel booking platform. It didn't really work for us. Now there's more options out there, so so I think it's just really important there's been lessons learned along the way, but just in terms of having a website, just knowing what's user friendly even just a couple of years ago isn't necessarily going to translate to today. And I think that was the biggest lesson that we've learned.
Yeah. And I love what you said too about, I think we often, and a lot of us do this, and it's not a judgment thing, but it's more that awareness thing, where it's this approach that the website is sort of like an item on the to-do list. And then once it's done, you're good, and it's kind of crazy because, like I said before, one of our specialties is coming into websites that have been around for a while. But that definition could be anywhere from 1 year old to 10 years old. And there's a massive difference in there. But if they're not effective, if they're not working, then there's actually no real difference, right? Because then you're like, well, it's going to cost you money to have this website, no matter what. It's somebody's going to have to get paid something somewhere along the line, your hosting provider, your whatever. And so at some point, if the website's not working, or if it's only working for a really small, really exclusive group of people, which is typically, my argument is that little itty bitty group of users is the person who's just like the person who designed the website. Because as far as that designer is concerned, it's working just fine, right? It looks fine. It's working on their monitor. but yeah, it's an investment no matter how you slice it. And that investment, it's maybe a little bit like a car. You know, it's great until it stops working, and then all of a sudden it's a really big problem. So yeah, so that's interesting, and I like that I like that you're redoing it, and I hope it goes really, really, really well, and I hope the new booking system is super smooth. And I'd be curious about I find these, I know online forums typically have a lot of accessibility issues. I don't know about booking platforms. I'm not sure about the coding behind that kind of thing. James, do you have any insights around that?
It's usually a lot to do with like communicating what the options are. If there's too many options to choose from, it can be a little bit time consuming to try to get through all of the options. But I would say by far the most important is like the checkout process or the booking process.
Sure,
And
yeah.
making sure that the user knows exactly what it is they're signing up for and purchasing, and what information needs to be provided in order to do that successfully. One of the big areas that we get into, like the most level of detail when it comes to testing, are forms. Whether that's like payment information form, an email newsletter sign up, anything to do with collecting user information. That usually gets a lot of emphasis in making sure that if the user doesn't put their phone number in correctly, or they make a mistake, how is that being handled? Is it being communicated clearly, or are we just putting a red outline around the field?
Yeah,
Red
right.
outlines don't transfer to screen readers. So we really take like that error identification and suggestion pretty seriously in that sense. But also the instructions and the labels to clearly communicate, check this box to agree to the terms and privacy and all of that. Is that actually a checkbox, or is it just styled to look like one?
Yeah.
So there's a lot that goes into like checking that part of the process, and it can get very technical very fast.
Sure.
But generally, if you're providing pretty good instructions and you're labeling things and you're giving feedback when errors happen, I typed in my email, but instead of putting an @ symbol, I used a pound sign. So it's going to throw back an error. How do we communicate that? So I would say check your checkout process, and at the very least, make sure there's a way for the user to review their order before making that final commitment.
Yes, yeah, that's a good suggestion too. Yeah, you know, we've had site projects, James. This comment will make you laugh, but we've had sites where the online contact form was right on the homepage, and when we tried to test it, there was an error, but there was no visual indication of the error, and there was actually a white at some point, I assume that someone had styled it to only be visible against a dark background, because the error message was actually white text, and it didn't get adjusted. And so when you tried to submit the form, which was the only way to contact this particular business, and it was right on the homepage, the contact form was unsuccessful, and there was no indication whatsoever, visually or otherwise. Well, actually, I don't know that because I wasn't using a screen reader, but visually there was no indication of what was happening.
Well,
and so I tried it 3 times until I got mad.
Two quick things to that, like the styling. It is important. There are certain disabilities that are impacted by the visual design you're using. I'm one of them as a person with low vision. Anybody who's colorblind has limited use of their hands. They're probably not using a mouse, and if you're using language like click here, then that's not going to be as inclusive as follow the link below or anything like that. But then you get into that sort of middle ground between follow the link below. Now you're saying you're alluding to the fact that I can see that link is visually positioned below. So there's a lot of sort of intricacies to think about. The visual aspect is important, which I think we said at the very beginning. For all users, it has to look good, but it also has to work good. And
Yeah.
to that point, I've been in a very similar situation where contact forms are front and center, and there's information in there that is vital. And if you're not providing instructions on what format do you want the date in, is it 2-digit month, day, year, or do you want a 4-digit year?
Right.
Those can be the difference between somebody contacting you and not. Providing little things like that of enter a 4-digit year or 2-digit year. So there's a ton of intricacy, but I will say with everything that I've talked about, it's more about the intention behind doing it than it is about the technical aspect. A lot of the accessibility comes off as you have to be a computer scientist or an engineer or a programmer. And I've done WordPress sites drag and drop that are more accessible than some of the corporate websites that are out there.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, you know that when I mentioned at the beginning that webinar that I attended back in 2019, I did remember her name. Her name was Laney, it's either Wilson or Watson, but she did a demonstration where she tried to visit her local municipal website to take a look at her. I think she was trying to pay her taxes. And it was this really big, complex, complicated website, you know, with a huge navigation menu, tons of drop-down items, but she couldn't even get there because there was a pop-up. And the pop-up message was for some sort of a survey that the municipality was doing. And it was coded so that there was no way for her to, there was no indication what was happening. Like this pop-up was only accessible to a visual user. And she was so experienced in internet use that she could suspect, she had the suspicion that there was a pop-up there, but there was no way she couldn't, you know, she couldn't escape out of it, she couldn't click out of it. And she ended up, she had to give up and, you know, go find a phone number. And you know what that's like. I don't know if any of you try to find phone numbers these days. Like people are not putting them in obvious places, or they're like, oh, it's not a public phone number. And you go, well, how are people supposed to get a hold of you? For those people who actually like to pick up their phone, because they are out there. It's not me necessarily, but you know, there are folks out there, and you need to, it's part of this discussion is around trying to make sure that you're accounting for as many different user preferences as possible too, right? And by doing that, then we can allow for those functional hiccups, because like you said, James, like it's not intentional. Like folks aren't setting out to create these things and exclude a whole pile of people, or to assume that, you know, you only use the website a certain way on a certain type of device, and it has to be like less than a year old, your device, and it has to be on like high speed Wi-Fi, whatever. But, you know, when you start to think about these different ways that your customers might need to be able to use your website, it really does change what you think about what the website needs to do, right? And then, you know, simplification is best. So we kind of segued a little bit there. My next question was going to be around challenges with websites.
Hey, Stephanie, I don't mean to
Yes.
interrupt, but it might be a good time to because we're in a webinar, our chat is automatically toggled off, but I am getting questions in the questions.
Great.
I can read out two, and I can also encourage the original person who put their hand up, Becca. You can type your question in the questions here and we'll see them. For the time being, would you like me to read out the two questions I have?
Sure.
Or would you like to see them? Okay. So the first one is from Dana. It says, are there any recommended apps or programs that we can use to know how our websites are being transcribed to people with visual impairments?
Ooh. Oh, that's a good question. James, I'm curious to hear what you have to say about that. I have some ideas, but James, I'd like to hear what you have to say.
So the good news is that whatever device you're on, it's probably already built into it natively. Every device, whether it's an iPhone or an Android or a tablet, a computer, Mac, Windows, it doesn't really matter anymore. All of these devices have accessibility features built right into them, one of them being screen readers. On the Mac environment, it's called VoiceOver, whether you're on a phone or a computer. In the world of Android, it's called TalkBack. In Windows, it's called Narrator, but you can also get a free one that you can download called NVDA. And you can turn those on and turn them off right from the device settings, as if you were turning the Wi-Fi or the Bluetooth on or off. I will say, if you're going to play around with it, do it on a computer, because you can still use the mouse. You don't have to rely on all of the new touch gestures on a phone. It's a lot easier to acquaint yourself with a screen reader on a computer, where you can still use the mouse if you need to. But generally speaking, you can toggle that on, open up a browser, open up your website, and use the keyboard, the tab key, the arrow keys, enter, spacebar, things like that on the keyboard, just to move through the content. The tab key will take you from interactive element to interactive element. The arrow keys will take you one thing to the next. It doesn't matter if it's text or interactive. So you could turn those on at any point and open up any website and see how accessible it is. There are automated tools out there that will do a quick scan of your page or your website and tell you how accessible it is. Those tools are really only checking for about 50% of all accessibility issues that it can. So they're not by any means a complete solution. They're very good for getting a baseline understanding of our color contrast may not be high enough of a ratio, or our keyboard functionality might be a little bit off. But there are a ton of tools out there in the form of bookmarks and extensions and websites. Wave is a very popular one. If you Google Wave accessibility tool, it should come up, and you can just copy and paste your URL into it, and it will run like a full scan of your homepage and tell you errors, features. You can sort of dive into all the different tabs in there to get a very quick, high-level understanding of what's going on with the page for users with disabilities and assistive technology.
Yeah, and that Wave has that little fast pass thing, so it does a little quickie thing. But again, it's an automated test, and you really can't duplicate, and it really skips over a lot of stuff, like you were saying. Dana, I'm not really sure now that after James was talking, I wasn't totally clear. Were you looking for a tool that would help you to assess your own website?
All it says is, are there any recommended apps or programs that we can use to know how our websites are being transcribed to people with visual impairments?
The best way is to turn on a screen reader and go through it. If you're doing it on a computer, you can use the mouse and click and hover over things, and it will read it out loud, the same as if you were navigating with a keyboard.
Yeah. I hope that answers your question, Dana. You're welcome to put any further comments into the chat or the Q&A if needed.
Yeah,
but yeah, that's interesting. Sorry.
Just type it as a question if you need any follow-up there.
Okay, excellent.
Would you like that second question now or later?
Yeah, well, let me just one quick little thing. I was gonna say with the with that, if we're talking about like ways that a business owner can assess their own website, there has been some discussion in the last couple of years, and I'm sure James, you know about this as well, around these accessibility overlays. And I see the smile, and I would encourage, if anyone was going to look into that, to do a lot of homework around them, and to just remember that it's still, no matter what accessibility, if you were going to try an accessibility overlay, it's something you're adding to the website. So it's kind of turning accessibility into an add-on, which is sort of what James was speaking to earlier. Whereas, you know, accessibility doesn't need to be an add-on. It really shouldn't be an add-on. And it's easier, simpler, cheaper, better to come at it from the bottom up rather than a top-down approach, which is what an overlay does. So if you start getting into some homework around that, Dana or anybody else on this call, just to, you know, just be cautious. Just like anything, just like with everything, every other little tool and, you know, thing that sounds like a great idea. Yeah. Do you have any comments for that, James, before we move on?
I was actually curious if there were any tools that were out there in terms of assessing the content or the written copy on the website. From that perspective, in the SEO world, we look at word count, we look at text to HTML ratios, but I was wondering if with AI and everything, if there were any tools that have come out to assess the quality of the content in terms of relevance and topic and purpose.
Yeah, I'm not aware of anything. I don't know if anybody else on the panel has seen anything like that yet. The stuff that we use is more around the SEO, that looking at the code. So like heading order and, you know, all of the meta and that sort of thing, which kind of is linked to, you know, how the content is structured, but not so much how it's spelled out necessarily, like the kind of words that you're using.
Well,
I know we do try to make sure with the sites that we do, we try to make sure that everything is at you know, at least a grade 8 reading level for comprehension. And that's partly as part of our approach, you know, to try to reduce that cognitive load on our poor visitors who probably have 3 minutes to explore our website and get the super important facts. So we try to make it skimmable. And so we try to discourage people from using those $10 words unless they absolutely have to. But I think a lot of it comes down to the intention, right? And what your strategy is for the website. So anything that I say around like that kind of $10 words and, you know, this sort of stuff there is that the intentionality still needs to be decided on before you make that choice one way or the other, whether you're using an accessibility overlay or you're, you know, building for accessibility or whatever. Understanding what that strategy is out of the gate, I think makes a really big difference. Yeah, cool. Catherine, you want to, what's the next question?
Sure. The second one is from Aaron, and it says, I'm a new business owner and a therapist. My husband created my website and I get such great feedback from my clients. They say it spoke right to them and they connected so well to it. I feel I have a good website, but my question is, how do I get it seen more? I would love for my website to work more for me. Also, like James just said, what seems to be Google friendly doesn't seem like language that connects to my clients.
Yep. Yeah. All right. So a couple things there, right? So if you want to try to find out if your website is findable, searchable, all that sort of thing. I mean, we actually have a testing tool on our own website. It's a really basic, I think it's 7 questions. So you can run through it and sort of see if there's any, it catches sort of that low level, the low hanging fruit around the functionality piece. I think it's interesting that, you know, like if your clients, I don't know, I'm torn on this one. If your clients like it and it's doing what they need it to do, then who cares about Google? That's what I'm going to say. I'm going to stay. I don't know. So
I would just add to that, if it's working for your clients, get more reviews. Google loves reviews. So the more of those you can get, the more Google is going to love your website.
100%. Yeah. Kelsey.
Yeah, I'd love to know how Erin is driving people to her website.
Yep.
Right. So like, does she have a lead magnet? And then does she have like an email sequence that's nurturing that lead magnet? So how is she getting new leads to the website and then nurturing them, nurturing them once they're on her site? You know, I just helped one of my clients, who's an integrative doctor. We created a quiz. People love quizzes. So there's ways to promote the quiz, which drive people to the website, which drive people to your email, you know, your nurture sequence. So I'd be interested to find out how she's actually, you know, what the call to value is. The call to value to drive more people to the website if she's getting good feedback on it, and it seems to be working, but it sounds like she just wants potentially more traffic to it.
Yeah. Well, I wonder, because maybe the website is working for her existing clients. Maybe it's not bringing in any new people. And in that case, I would question whether the structure of the website is set up to be optimized for search engines, right? Because we do find that frequently, that when you do that initial evaluation, you go, well, actually, you don't have any meta tags. You don't have any, your headings are all out of order. So if your website's working really well for this group of people and they're already your clients, there's that conversation piece around what is the strategy for the website? Like, is it there to back up your existing, like what you're saying? You're saying, this is me, this is what I do. And you use that website as something that you send to people after they've already had that introduction to you and your business. That's one thing. And that I would argue that that's a different strategy to saying, I want my website to just organically attract all of these new people to me that have never found me before. In my view, that's a very different approach to having the website. And I think most people would say that they want that second one where it's just open to everyone and everyone just magically comes in. But, that takes a lot of time. And I'm not sure, I forgot the name of that question person, but I'm not sure how long she's been a service provider. But,
Erin.
there is no, Erin, thank you. There is no magic bullet. There are things that will work better than others, but a lot of things will involve time. And any SEO strategy, like Afton could speak to, right, with content strategy, you're looking at, you don't look for anything. I mean, the work that we do with the SEO, we call it a little an on-site SEO boost when we're doing our website work. We're like 3 months minimum before you start to see some serious impact. And then if you want to see long-term growth, you're talking long-term planning kind of stuff. And by the time that starts to cycle through, you're probably ready for a rebuild. Right, Kelsey? So it's an ongoing evolution, and also I would like to say too, there are iterations. You have to be prepared to maybe either not hit it out of the gate right off the mark, especially when you're just getting started and you're sort of trying out these different things, but also that you need to be able to experiment a little bit and be willing to make changes with the technology, which Kelsey was also speaking to earlier. So, it's not a once and done.
I'll hop in on this as well. I think it sounds like there is messaging alignment on the website for your audience, Erin. And I think that that's a huge part of the battle, right? Because oftentimes we write website copy and we write it from our perspective as the business owner. We don't do customer research. It doesn't really end up hitting the mark with our audience. But I think you've got anecdotal feedback here that the website, you said it spoke right to them. So I would say it sounds like your question is really, it's around, this is a visibility piece. And so I think going back to what Kelsey said, I'd be interested in the same line of thinking and really looking at that from a content strategy angle. And it's, it's like, okay, we know we've got a website where the messaging, at least, it speaks to the audience. And so how can we get that seen by more of the same people? And what Steph said is absolutely right. Organic search is, it's a worthwhile strategy, but it takes a lot of time and effort. And it definitely is a long-term strategy. But I think coming back to just thinking about that audience, why your website's working for them, what about it is speaking to them, what types of content can you create that will delve more into those topics? And I think with anything that we've said today, it comes back to just how can you serve them with your website? And always looking at it from the perspective of how can you answer a question, provide useful information, enable them to take an action on the website in a clear and easy way. And if you look at it from that perspective and really think about their needs and what kind of content works for them, then you can begin to increase your organic search footprint, so to speak. And then I think also it's just, a lot of consistency and showing up and things like that.
Yeah, and I think it would be interesting too to see the structure of the site as the resident tech nerd. But we often come across websites that have been around. We rejuvenated one recently that Google hadn't updated the search results in over 10 years. So all of this work that they had done on their website leading up to working with us, when we had to go back, we went through do you guys know about the internet, the Wayback Archive, and whatever it's called, Wayback Machine, I think it's called. So you can go back and look at, cached versions of your website. And we went back to look, because we're nerds and this is one of the things that we do. So we just went back to see. And when they had launched the new website by their other provider, and I'm pretty sure that, I think she said it was in 2016, 2017, something like that. Whatever happened at that stage, and I have no idea what that is, right? Because I wasn't involved and because things change. So whatever was done at that time, for whatever reason, the search engines weren't updated. So the previous version of the website was still showing on those search results. So even though so many years have gone by, whatever, what is that, 7 years later, you know, the search engines are still showing the older business name, they're still showing services that they no longer provide, you know, like stuff that you're like, oh, wow, I had no idea. And that's not going to come from that visual perception of the website, right? From that public front end piece, that's all in the back end. And I'd be curious to see if you can get an objective opinion on the website, Erin, because I find, I don't know if this is something that you guys have found on this panel, but I find sometimes clients are just too nice, existing clients, and they just say, oh, it's really great. Oh, it's really great. I don't know. They don't want to hurt my feelings. I don't know. I'm not really sure, but they're not actually going to tell you what their experience was really genuinely like. You know, they already know you. They like you, obviously, because they're recurring clients. And so maybe they're not going to say, oh, you know, when I tried to find your services, you know, maybe I had to click 6 different things to get there. You know, maybe those little details might escape them when they give you that feedback. So that would be something to keep in mind as well, I would say.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in, Steph. I think that's super important, because if I start working with a new client, there's many times I will go and do an audit of their website. And again, not from the back end, you know, design specialist, but just from a user experience entrepreneur perspective. And I'll go through and I'll give them, you know, a list of notes of what my experience of their website is, knowing their niche, knowing what they're selling, you know, knowing their services. And sometimes it's very eye-opening, because they're like, oh wow, I never thought about it that way before, you know. And even from my end, you know, with having that done to our website, sometimes you're just so in it and it's hard to see that outside perspective. So I think it's super important to do that, to have that.
Yeah, and I would say the same. I'm sure James would say the same from the accessibility standpoint, right? It's that same argument that we always come across when we start speaking about things around disabilities, is that until you've had that firsthand experience, either yourself or with a family or a loved one or whatever, it's just not something you're going to become aware of. And yet, when you design with that stuff in mind at the beginning, or you go in and you sort of fix it up, it's kind of like one of the analogies that I like to use is automatic door openers. You know, they were created for people in wheelchairs specifically. And then next thing you know, what is it, like 50, 60 years later, the pandemic, and none of us wanted to touch anything. And you couldn't open a door that didn't have a button, you know, without touching it. So that thing that was designed for a very specific group of users ended up being something that everybody can use and benefit from. So
I would say another one is captions in the digital landscape.
Yeah.
I don't know very many people that don't use or turn on captions when they're watching Netflix or Hulu or whatever it may be. Most people that I talk to have used captions, and they don't have any difficulty hearing.
Yeah, that's me. I read all your videos.
That's me too. I don't, when I'm looking at a video on my phone, I almost never have the sound on. I find it actually quite jarring. And so I just really prefer to have it silent and just look at the captions. And if a video doesn't have captions, I probably won't watch it.
Yeah, I completely agree. There's some TV shows that I used to watch as well, ones that were set in Ireland specifically, where without those captions, I wouldn't have picked up on half of the words that they were using. So that was extremely helpful. It's funny, right? Because we used to say that was like, to somebody's too highbrow, you know, if you were going to the International Film Festival or something, if you wanted to watch something with subtitles. And that was sort of like, you know, people would sort of criticize you a little bit and make you feel like you're being a snob. That's what I remember anyway. And now it's everywhere, which is great.
If you want a new experience, watch a video with audio descriptions.
Ooh, yeah. That's, you know what, I saw, James, there was a fellow, it was through an accessibility group. I can't remember what it was, but he was his job is an audio describer in the States somewhere.
It's an art
and
form.
It was fascinating.
It's an art form, but try, you can find audio descriptions on almost any platform now. So if you want to try something new, check out audio descriptions on the next movie you watch or TV show.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Because this fellow that was doing, sorry, we're going on a little bit of a sideline here, but this fellow that was doing the audio descriptions, he was talking about, you know, like he had us all close our eyes, and then the description of this scene in a documentary, and then the difference between saying, you know, it's this kid climbing a tree versus, you know, this kid climbing this type of tree and in the rain, and this kid is a certain age and he's struggling to reach the whatever branch, and it was this much more emotive, you know, and like giving that experience, which is really important in that context. Maybe not in your image alt tags on your website, but yeah. Yeah, that's really cool. All right, excellent. Catherine, do we have any other questions at this stage?
We're all caught up for now.
Okay, cool. I think we've got just enough time to talk about, I was really curious to see if you guys have any thoughts you'd like to put into this conversation around technology and trends in websites today. And that could open up, that could be probably a whole topic on its own, AI. And I just wondered if anybody has anything that they would like to put into this conversation today. I'll go first. So I won't talk about AI specifically, but I want to point out, because part of what I thought we'd be talking about today would be like website trends, right? And because, you know, how Kelsey was saying, you know, the technology has changed. So when I started doing web design, Flash was still a thing. Do you guys remember Flash? And then Flash went away, and Flash went away like bam, like Flash was gone. And then it wasn't even just that Flash was gone. It was like, I was reading articles in 2017 that were saying, oh, Flash is so easy to use and it's so inexpensive to build a page on your website. And you really should do this because it's this interactive thing and it's going to increase engagement with your website, right? And that was in 2017. And I think Flash was taken down, not just unsupported, but it was like taken down. Like browsers were like, does not compute. In, I think 2020, like it wasn't that long ago. But then anything that had been using Flash, like that was like crisis, you know, because their websites are literally not going to show up on these internet browsers. And that was a trend. And I think that's just a fun little thing. Did you guys ever have any Flash things going on for websites that you worked on? Is that too niche? I should talk about less niche stuff. Okay. What about, did you guys ever have websites that you tried using images on the navigation menu instead of words? Do you guys remember that? Am I dating myself? Oh, you guys. Okay, well, anyway, that was awful too. How about websites with sidebars that have lots and lots of widgets? Do you remember those?
I haven't seen
lots
a
of all this
website with a
information.
left sidebar in a while.
Really? Oh, you should come work with me. I see them all the time. It's hilarious.
I see the right one coming back, like it's making a comeback, but like the left
Really?
sidebar navigation, I very rarely do I see that.
Yeah. So, you know, something else that I find really interesting is the balance between user expectations and like standardization. So there's a certain level of website design things that are the standard expectation for users. And then there's that element of, oh, I want to be cutting edge, you know, do this really different thing and really stand out with my website. So for a while there, we were starting to see, you know, we have this horizontal menu on most websites on the laptop, like on a monitor, not on the mobile, but the horizontal. So you might say like home, about, services, whatever, contact. And then there were some websites that were coming up and they were trying to use a vertical navigation menu. Have you guys ever tried to use a website like that? It's like a sidebar, but they put everything down the side instead. And that was really difficult but interesting because
That
I
sounds
understand
like a elementary bootstrap developer.
maybe that's what it was. Maybe that's who some of my people were. I don't know. But it's interesting because that, you know, wanting to find that balance between doing something new, but also understanding that, especially these days, our users, we have conditioned ourselves to expect really fast, really, like to expect things to be in a certain place and to be named consistently, it's like when Afton was talking about like not clear but not clever. I think that was what the phrase you used.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like instead of saying, more about, oh wait, there's more on one of your menu, sort of names, to stick with like about,
Well,
or whatever the thing is.
One that I'll throw in from the accessibility side is like by default, if you add a link, it's going to be blue with an underline. And a lot of designers are shifting towards making the links brand colors or aligning it in that sort of way. And in doing so, they're removing the underline because the underline doesn't look good, I guess, all of the sudden.
Yep.
But in the success criteria that we use for tests, there's one called use of color, and not using color as the only way to add meaning or value or to allude to an interaction like clicking on a link or engaging with a link. And by removing that underline, every link in the website is now not meeting one of those recommendations for web accessibility. That's probably the most common one I see. Also, the like weird gray area that has emerged between what is a button and what is a link.
Yes.
Most people style links to look like buttons, and then they refer to them as buttons when they're saying use the button below. But to a screen reader, that in the back end of the code is actually an anchor tag, which is a link. So if you're telling me to use the button below and I'm navigating by buttons only and there's no buttons, that does create a little bit of a problem. I'm not saying it's wrong to style them to look like buttons, but make sure that you're prompting using the right semantics, which is a weird sort of gray area in and of itself, because if it looks like a button but it's a link, in your prompting, do you say use the link /button below?
Yeah.
There's really no right way to sort of counteract that. So
yeah,
there's sort of been this emergence of using semantic HTML elements but styling them with CSS to look like something else.
Oh yeah.
Well, and I've heard as well, even on the topic of using the word below, if sort of, I guess, elements on a website change when you're looking at it on the desktop version versus the mobile version, the item may not be below. So I've always kind of followed that, I guess, best practice to just not say that in general, because it may not be there. It could just add confusion to the experience.
Well, and that's also accessibility. There's another criteria called sensory characteristics, and referring to things based on size, color, location, orientation is a limiting factor to people who can see. If you can't see that it's below or that it's blue, it doesn't really help or add any value.
Yeah, agreed. I would say too, there's also so this is also one of those things that also touches on accessibility, but the autoplay feature, which is, one of my biggest pet peeves. But it used to be that ads would play automatically. Remember those days? Am I dating myself some more? So, and then you'd have like some tab open in your browser and it would be shouting at you and you'd be like freaking out trying to, figure out how to shut it off. And nowadays I find personally that there's less of the audio that's auto playing, but the videos are still auto playing. And that makes me wild because they don't have that user control. If you're going to have that video on the website, then make sure that I can shut it off, stop it from moving, or whatever. And I've had clients who, they get vertigo when there's things that are moving without them, like unexpectedly on a website, whether those are animations or like GIFs or videos or whatever. So that's something that you get that the functionality piece around having that autoplay, which was a trend. I mean, everybody wanted to have videos and slideshows and these automatically changing things, thinking that it was like a dynamic element, something that would be not interactive, because the videos were often not interactive, but a slideshow, sometimes you could control it, you know.
The rule of thumb with that is if it lasts for more than 5 seconds, it should have like a pause play button.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, I've heard, I had someone say that from their perspective, the slideshow at the top with like the 5 different options or whatever, to say that if you put a slideshow at the top of your homepage or your whatever page on your website, what it's indicating to that user is that you couldn't make up your mind what you wanted to put up there.
I
So you put
remember
up
when
this
those were so
thing.
popular.
Yeah, yeah, I know. It wasn't that long ago, you know.
It wasn't.
And this is the
yeah.
thing, like, you know, we set out to create these things and we want them to reflect our business and we want to create this impression, you know, on the web. And then, you know, next thing you know, a year or two later, and things have changed significantly or drastically in the case of Flash, and you're left with this thing that you've got to do something with. Because the reality is that these websites, they're the digital door to our business. And if we make the door blocked, you know, we have all of these things that prevent someone from opening the door, whether it's an accessibility, like from a disability point of view, or accessibility from like rural Wi-Fi, or, you know, my crappy old mobile with a cracked screen on the bus, you know, whatever it is. All of those things prevent the person from coming in to visit. And it comes back to that empathy thing, right? And trying to look at the different contexts that people might have when they want to try to use our websites. So that's kind of fun. Is there any other, I guess I should ask, because we're getting close to time. Catherine, are there any more questions that we can address?
No, all is quiet. Everybody's listening.
Awesome. Oh, I think we had one. Let me just check. I had a note. There was one. Oh, well, actually, I think we sort of talked about this. One of the questions that I had from someone when they signed up was that they just redid their website last year. And she wanted to know, do I need to have it looked at it again already? I think we've kind of talked about that, right? Is there anything that any of my guest speakers would like to add to help us round off this conversation today? Nothing? Okay, cool. So I would, oh, sorry, go ahead, James.
I don't want to overwhelm anyone.
No, well, there's always, it's hard, right? Because these conversations can get really techie really quickly. And then I know sometimes, you know, when Afton was talking about trying to find that messaging that meets, you know, what the language that our people are using. And I know I struggle with that too. I sometimes get too far into the techie, nerdy, you know, ooh, let's talk about HTML kind of stuff. And it's something you have to work at. It's just like when we were talking about these different iterations, and it's always good to have these conversations because we can talk about those different perspectives on those topics, and we can try to either get really excited and really in depth, or we can try to sort of keep it accessible, James, to all of our attendees, right?
Yeah, everything's a process. Just take it one step at a time, and
yeah,
at some point you'll get somewhere and turn around and you'll be surprised at how far you've made it.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? So I should say one other thing. So we have this webinar coming up March 6th, and I would love to have anybody that's signed up for this roundtable is more than welcome to attend. We'll be sending out that invitation. So that's all about rejuvenating your website and trying to remove all of these obstacles and barriers that you maybe don't know are there, and how that can really impact your website's effectiveness in a really, really big, really verifiable, I can show you the data, you know, kind of a way. And the other thing, a little quote that I actually came across yesterday, and it was unrelated to anything we've talked about today, which is sort of fun, but I thought it was a really great quote. And the quote, and I can't find it now, of course, but it was something around the lines of that mastery is a series of steps. It's not like that one shot deal, you've got it done. It's always going to change and evolve, and it's always something you're going to have to continually work at. And I think that's a really nice thing to sort of remember as well with our websites. That's cool. If anybody, we've got a few minutes left, so why don't we go through, Catherine, it says that I have to turn the chat on. I don't know how to do that. So I tried and I couldn't make it work. So we had said that if each of the guest speakers here today want to share one place where anybody attending this roundtable could come and follow you. If you don't mind doing that verbally, because I don't have a way to put it in the chat, that would be fantastic. So Afton, can we start with you? What would be the one place you'd like to send people to come and
Yeah,
check out
so
more of your
I
work?
would suggest that people go to scribenational.ca and you can find out all about our team, our approach, our services. And we've got actually a lot of free resources and blogs as well if you do want to learn about messaging, content strategy, content writing.
Wonderful, thanks. All right, Kelsey, how about you? What's one place of all your many
I would
places?
say, yeah, of all my many places, I would say come follow me on Instagram. So
Awesome.
Instagram, it's the THE Kelsey Matheson. Come follow me there because I do share about my business coaching, Anamaya Resort, all of the wonderful things. Yeah, come and join me there.
Excellent, thank you. That's great. And James, what about you? What's your one place?
I would say just look me up on LinkedIn. Just use first and last name, James Warrington. And if you have any questions, my inbox is always open to talk about accessibility or UX, UI, whatever you want to talk about. I'm always here.
That's great. Yeah, I appreciate that. That's a great offer. All right, thank you, everybody. This has been a really great conversation. I really enjoyed this. And I hope that our next one would be maybe some of you would like to join us again. I think we're going to set it for some time in April, but I don't have a set date. So once I have that sort of lined out, then I'll send you guys some more information about that, and we'll see if maybe you want to come chat again, and we'll try to keep it not too techy. And I think that's it. So if nobody has anything else, Catherine, there's nothing else that we need to address?
No, we're all wrapped up. Thank you, everybody.
Wonderful. Okay, so since I can't put the link in the webinar or link to the webinar in the chat because it's beyond my capacity apparently, then I will say that the email that we send out will have links to each of the panelists that we have talked with today so that you can learn more and follow them in their little places that they've shared here today. And we will also have a link to that upcoming webinar on March 6th. And I guess that's it. All right. Thanks,
Thank you so
everybody.
much.
Thanks so
Cheers.
much.
Thank you so much. Thanks,
Thanks.
Steph.
Have
Nice
a
to
good
meet
one.
everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Catherine, I don't know what to do next. What do you think?
We'll just
Backstage?
go on backstage.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
It says the host will be right back. The host is right back. Now I'm going to stop it.